Hello and welcome to a very special podcast. I guess we're calling this Sipping Pop While Guarding Your Popcorn on the Couch. My name is Anthony Sitko, co-host of Capes on the Couch, and I am joined by quite a motley crew of podcasters, a bit of a menagerie. Why don't we, I guess, all go around and identify ourselves. We'll start, since I'm looking at popcorn psychology right now on the camera, why don't you three identify yourselves?
Hi, I'm Brittany Brownfield. I'm a child therapist.
My name is Ben Stover. I'm a clinical director and individual therapist.
My name is Hannah Espinoza, and I'm a marriage and family therapist.
And we're popcorn psychology.
And then next, I guess we'll switch over to Anna from Freudian Sips.
Hello, I'm Anna from Freudian Sips. I am a licensed professional counselor in Illinois, and I am representing myself and my lovely mother who cannot be with us today.
And then we will go over to Pop Psych 101.
Hi, I'm Mike from Pop Psych 101. I am uneducated.
Me too!
But I'm the co-host of Pop Psych 101, and I'm bipolar, which is like what I do on the show, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, and then
Totally counts.
And then we've got Project
That's my
Guardians.
angle.
Yes, hello. We are Project Guardians, formerly. We are now Guardians MH. We are a 501c nonprofit for the mental health awareness and gaming community. My name is Alex, also known as Sentinel Dad. Professionally, I'm a malpractice investigator.
I'm Dr. Goku. I'm a resident in psychology and the clinical director at Guardians MH.
And I'm Joe, and I am the unprofessional average Joe.
Right. There's more.
You're not alone. No, I trained in various different crisis intervention preventions. I'm also a crisis counselor with Crisis Text Line, and continuing my own education in the mental health field.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for joining this group that I sort of put out a clarion call on Twitter. I think that's how we all sort of interacted and met with each other was through Twitter. My show, Capes on the Couch, my co-host, Doc Issues, is a board-certified psychiatrist. So like some of you, I am not a professional licensed. I'm not a mental health professional. I'm an attorney by trade, but I'm just somebody who really loves comic books. And unfortunately, Doc could not join us today because his work has been absolutely ridiculous. He got a new position, and then I think everything just went to hell from there. And sadly for him, good for his bank account, sad for him personally. But so
That's what happens when you take on more responsibility.
Yes. And also what happens when one of your, the doctors in your ER gets assaulted by a patient and has to leave work for a couple of days, then you end up having to carry the load, which, unfortunately happened. So in any case, I got you all sort of together because we all play in very similar sandboxes when it comes to the topics of our shows. And I thought it might be fun to sort of discuss sort of, I guess, what brought us into the field, why we care so much about mental health, and why we all opted to create podcasts to discuss it. And then sort of discuss, I know several of the podcasts here look at the intersection of mental health and various aspects of pop culture. And so we can discuss sort of the progression of the depictions of mental health through our respective chosen I guess, areas, as well as personal stories. So I guess that's, so I guess I'll start with myself since I'm talking and no one seems to be interrupting me.
We're all listening so intently.
I am not that interesting to listen to, I swear.
We specifically said, though, try not to interrupt.
Okay, that's true. I did say that. So
we're just following your rules, Anthony.
I know. I'm sorry. So
I also think there's a certain amount of irony in saying I'm not interesting to listen to, but you have a podcast. Own it, man.
Well, isn't that what we all think? I don't think.
I think I'm fascinating. I don't know.
I'm
what
amazing.
Wow.
Yeah,
There you go.
we're actually kind of awesome. So
Yeah,
There's
agreed.
there's just so much humility floating around right now.
I know, seriously, it's amazing that your heads have all managed to fit in the frames of the video that I'm looking at on the podcast. That you must have amazing neck muscles.
Important for mental health.
So
I don't know how many humble people operate podcasts, just as a rule.
There you go.
Probably true.
Fair enough. So
Fair enough.
So in any case, Doc and I started this about a year and a half ago or so because we were driving to Pittsburgh for a Tough Mudder, and we were talking about how we've always wanted to talk about the intersection of mental health and its depiction in comic books. And we thought about a book, and we thought about a couple of different things, and we settled on a podcast because Doc wanted to retain some semblance of anonymity with his professional life. And also I have a radio background. And so we thought that would be a good marriage of the two. And it just sort of spiraled from there. And the show started as a way to show the differences between what certain characters are alleged to have in terms of their mental health. Like, oh, this character is bipolar, or this character has schizophrenia. But what would that really look like? And what it's sort of, I guess, morphed into is a more general and broad-based discussion about each of the disorders that these characters have and how you would treat them, but also discussing how they would be treated in a real life scenario, and focusing much more on the destigmatization of mental health in terms of comic books and pop culture writ large. So that's sort of how we got started. Anybody else want to take it from there?
Sure, I guess we can go. So I credit The Last Jedi really with starting our podcast. Hannah and Brittany, I would sit around and discuss how well we thought that Mark Hamill depicted someone who was traumatized in The Last Jedi, and how that would be very easily, my mics are, there we go. So we thought it would be very easy to discuss how well he represented trauma and how a traumatized person might respond to the massive amounts of complex trauma he has encountered throughout his life. And then when all the fan backlash started, like, well, what do you mean, like, he's not acting like Luke? Of course he's not acting like Luke. Look what happened to him. And then after we discussed it in the office several times, I went home and in the shower just had an epiphany. And then the next time I saw them, was like, oh my God, we have to do a podcast. Because I know they both listened to them avidly. And I was like, we have to do this.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it started.
Yeah, I mean, specifically with that movie, I remember there was something where we all loved that Last Jedi so much because we thought it was a really intelligent, like emotionally intelligent movie. And I think we were all really caught off guard by what Ben was saying, the response to it. And so it kind of gave us an idea that there is not necessarily a need there, but there's definitely still a disconnect between how mental health really looks in media, and when it's done well, how it's still kind of misunderstood possibly by the general population.
And I think the other part really was that we all worked in community mental health and really wanted to help in any way just decrease mental health stigma because of all the interactions we had with people around that, and really wanting to help people. Again, people are so uneducated about mental health in such a specific way that it really felt like this would be such a good way to help just increase knowledge about what it would be like, and also what it's like to be in therapy. Because that also is so stigmatized as well.
Right. And then I think the last thing that I'll say about us is what started it, at least got me thinking about it, was my favorite class I took in undergrad was a psychology in film class, and reading the textbook we use for that. And then also finding Dr. Travis Langley's books on Batman and psychology and all the myriad of geek psychology stuff he has done. All of those inspired me to kind of go this direction with it and want to communicate about mental health to destigmatize it in the way Hannah was talking about and put it so well.
Mm-hmm.
And what podcast are you guys?
We are Popcorn Psychology.
Yeah, I just figured people would be like, who? I don't know who those three people are.
You're probably right.
Yeah, I definitely failed to mention that. I do that sometimes.
You always have to plug the show. Come on.
Yeah.
Anna, I guess why don't you jump in then?
That's good that I get to go right after Popcorn Psychology, because I'm angry at Popcorn Psychology for doing the podcast that I want to do. I love movies, and I wish I could have done a podcast about mental health in movies. So I love listening to you guys just because you talk about stuff and you talk about it so well that I can't be too mad at you, I guess. But I one of the reasons that we wanted to start a podcast mainly is just because we talk about this stuff anyway. One of the things that I love about I'm Freudian Sips, by the way. I was
about to say it.
Gotcha. I am also Freudian Sips with my mom, Bonnie. She can't be here today, but we are always getting together and we're always talking about new concepts, and we're talking about different theories in psychology. And eventually it just got to this point where like, we should be recording this and maybe other people will want to listen to this as well, because I really love that when we do these weekly episodes on the various things we talk about, that I always learn something. And I feel like a really important part of being in this field is just constantly learning and constantly growing and constantly, expanding our minds and our own viewpoints. So I think it's really cool that we've given ourselves an opportunity to do that every week. And very much like you, Anthony, my mom has a background in radio. So we were able to kind of join those two ideas and start something that we hope people like listening to as much as we like doing it.
I think you guys are a hoot and a half. It's always a pleasure to listen to the way that the two of you interact and play back and forth with each other.
We are not quite as directed as some of you guys. Like I really admire that you guys have this, like, we talk about this and we talk about these things and how they, go with mental health. And we're just like, let's talk about a person this week. Let's talk about an idea. I don't know.
Guardians?
Yes. So we are the Guardians MH podcast. We actually just changed our name from Project Guardians since we established our 501c3 nonprofit.
The new name is awesome.
Congrats.
Thank you.
Yeah, it took a lot arguing with the state of New York trying to get the proper nonprofit name. But no, the podcast is an ancillary item for us. Like we started off, Joe and I did charity streams for a couple of years, just back and forth for different causes. And I think Joe asked me, he goes, so what are we going to do next? I was like, I think I want to do something with mental health. And we were just started right away. I personally, I had a struggle. I'm a suicide survivor. So that kind of fueled my passion for it. And so we started this, we said, all right, well, let's do a mental health awareness stream. And like, as we got closer to it, it was picking up a lot of steam. Like a lot of people were really into it. It's like, all right, well, maybe we'll make this like a yearly thing, or we'll do different causes every few months. And that's what we did. And that evolved into a mental health awareness community specifically for the video gaming community. And eventually that just kind of evolved, and we said, you know what, let's go all in. And the podcast was simply just another avenue for talking about mental health, for trying to break that stigma. And, we definitely gear it towards the video gaming community, but it's for all. We do talk about pop culture. On our show, every episode, we also do by Dr. Goku, because he's the one that can form a consistent thought one moment at a time. That's probably why he's a doctor. Just saying. I mean, he's got a lot of student debt, but whatever. So we do a character analysis. It's either a video gaming character or pop culture character. Like on our most recent episode, we did Ash Williams, the protagonist from the Evil Dead series.
Oh, cool.
And, Dr. Goku,
Hail to the king, baby.
Yeah, my boomstick, brother. But in most of the time, Dr. Goku tries to throw a psychological spin on it and try and more or less diagnose the character, which is a lot of our listeners really enjoy it. So again, the podcast is another avenue for getting it out there, and we just try and have fun with it. Especially for the video gaming community, which has thankfully in 2019 is being less stigmatized as we go on. It's a diverse set of people that are playing this, and it's not 20-year-old guys in their mom's basement anymore.
And to play off that more, video games have an incredible potential to become powerful tools that can change the way people think about mental health. I mean, they can create this experience like no other. Like there's several games that have come out in recent years that depict mental health conditions and illnesses that video games have never really tapped into or were able to depict.
The one that really comes to mind is Hellblade.
Exactly.
You need a really deep dive into that one.
That one was amazing.
As far as Psychosis is concerned. And then we're going to steal a few seconds and plug our friend Ken Hall. Joe, I mean, he's a Canadian, and he's forming this game that's almost like an action in a card game where you're the whole synopsis of the game is that you're a soldier and you are supposed to manage your squad's mental health.
Yep. The mental health aspect of the characters plays just as much of a factor as the fighting in the game. So
what's the game called?
It's Destiny Sword. And that's
Destiny
from
Sword. That sounds awesome.
Yep, it's from go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, it's from Two Dogs Games, and they also partnered with a veterans organization up in Canada to get real feedback on the psyche of a soldier in the midst of combat.
Yeah, they partnered with Spartan Wellness, if I remember correctly.
Yes,
right?
Yep, absolutely correct. But no, so that's kind of the click or the medium that we were trying to go for. Again, it was just another medium to talk about mental health. We also have like several other programs in our wheel for like peer support, real-time support. We do have some mental health professionals such as Dr. Goku in our community Discord. So people at any time 24/7 be like, hey, I'm having a problem, can I talk to someone? And we very much say, we are not a substitute for professional care. But if you're in crisis and you want to talk to either a mental health professional or a trained crisis intervention specialist such as Joe and myself, you can do that.
That's super cool.
But
that's such an resource, because I think a lot of people don't seek mental health because they don't know where to start. They don't know how to start.
Right, and especially for the community we try and touch the most, like video gamers. There are, touching back on that stigma, there are a lot of video gamers who are, I think recluse is too harsh of a word, but people that are less socially
introverts.
Introverts are less socially active. I know, like down here where I'm in Atlanta, like I have very few local friends. Most of my friends I know online, like Joe, Dr. Goku, some of my other gaming friends. So having that medium to talk to someone when you might not have a confidant in your local area was very important to us.
Yeah. Have you guys heard of the game That Dragon Cancer?
No.
So and not to side rail this too much. I just thought the video game thing was so interesting with the mental health aspect. There is a father. He was a video game designer or coder, and he lost his young son, like 3 or 4 years old, to cancer.
Yes, I know this game.
Yep. Yeah, and it's obviously I can't even imagine, just so hard.
He won one of the awards at the Video Game Awards recently.
Yeah, this game is like he wanted to document what grief is like, and you play this game where it's more like a story game, but I guess you go through and kind of follow what happens like in the hospital and at home with his child. And it's kind of like a select this game, point click game. But as the game goes on, you lose less control of what you're doing. And because the cancer won, but it's obviously at the end, like there's a lot of lessons to be learned about like how to deal with, something you can't control or not. So I just thought that was interesting.
Absolutely.
No, it's very.
That's I don't know how far we're actually going into game. Depression Quest is a really good little
That's
game.
a great one.
yeah, it really gets you in the mind. I think it's especially important for people who don't have depression to play, because it really helps you understand what it's like to have depression, and that like out of control feeling is very, it kind of builds as the game goes on. If you don't like get help for this depression, then you just have less options. It's a really powerful, like really getting inside the viewpoint of someone who has depression.
Yeah, I think another one that plays alongside that depression quest is actually Night in the Woods, which really depicts depression and anxiety as well, with somebody, you know, that moves away from home and then ends up moving back home and then having that, you know, isolation, and then the depression really hits them. It's a really interesting game and really touching. Actually, the creators of it, I can't think of the studio off the top of my head, but Adam and his wife, I'd met them at PAX, and they developed the game, and he actually suffers from depression and anxiety. So that's another one to look into. It's a really great game.
But I'm gonna have to get you guys to send me a list of these.
Yeah, no joke.
We'll put them in the show notes.
But in a nutshell, that's kind of where our podcast birthed from.
I think not only that was a great story, but also a lot of good tips and potential following games for some of the listeners of this podcast. So even if you're not super into gaming, I'm sure there's a video game out there in that lengthy list that might interest you. So, Mike, I think you're the only one who didn't get a chance to go on sort of where Pop Psych 101 came from.
Sure. So yeah, Mike, co-host of Pop Psych 101. We're a lot like Popcorn Psychology. I call them a sister podcast. There's a few of us that are really similar with concept, but I think we all execute it like dramatically differently. And it's just cool because there's just so much information, and it's easy to get into with the movies and stuff, but we do mental health in movies, books, television, and we do news and stuff as well. But like I said up top, like kind of my angle on it is that I do have bipolar disorder, and I host my podcast with a therapist who lives in New Jersey. And we met like randomly online. I'm like an audio guy, just like an audiophile, and his show was out there, and I ended up hearing it, and I kind of got the sense that he needed help with his sound, and he had another podcast he was doing, and I just offered my assistance, like editing his podcast for free, as a kind of like pay it forward to mental health. Because he was doing good work for free, and I just thought he needed to be heard. And we, sort of formed a friendship that way. And then he wanted to expand that show, and he ended up deciding that he made a list of things and was like, put it out on a poll on a Facebook group, like a podcaster support group. And it had like a whole bunch of ideas for segments for a show he wanted to do on that current show. And one of them was the movies, books, and TV, like sort of angle. And I was like one of the only ones that was like, yes, do that. And eventually he just like emailed me and was like, do you want to like make a different show and just do that? And I was like, yeah, that would be amazing. And for me, like getting into it is like, I'm obsessed with creating. I can't stop. I've been, in bands since I was like 13, and I used to be a pitch writer. I was on an agency. We like wrote pitches for sitcoms for a while. We got fired and nothing. Yeah, it was terrible. It was, no one ever picked anything up there, but yeah, I've done just so much different kind of things. And this was just like the next avenue for me to do something creative. So I always do kind of like to say that when I joined Pop Psych 101, I started it very selfishly. It was just another avenue to create. And whereas I was like doing the helping him out because I wanted him to be heard with the audio for like free, doing Pop Psych wasn't, I wasn't thinking like, oh, I could help people by making this show. I just kind of thought, I'm going to do this fun thing for me. But then we released our third episode. We did, is what we do is we find something in the media and we cover a very specific thing. For example, we did bipolar disorder in Silver Linings Playbook. So we talked about their depiction of bipolar disorder and whether or not it was accurate. And that's kind of our angle. Like things are portrayed this way. Is it accurate or not? And if it's not, what does it actually look like? So we talked about that movie, and Ryan was just enthused that he thought it was like such a great portrayal. Well, I have bipolar disorder, and I didn't think it was the best portrayal. It is up until a point in Silver Linings Playbook, but if you really pay attention in the third act, his mental illness just disappears, and they don't ever talk about it again. It's like he's cured because he found Jennifer Lawrence.
Because of the power of love, yeah.
Yeah, the power of love. And
which is a trope you see over and over.
Like Benny and June's a good example of that.
Yeah. And it's just like
Johnny Depp and she's fine. She can live independently all of a sudden.
Yep. And so Ryan had an opinion, and like by the end of the episode he was like, whoa, I didn't think about that. But what ended up happening was we had to record the episode twice because and I hate this word, but I kept getting triggered.
Oh, sure.
And I had a really hard time talking about like the intensity of his bipolar disorder that was being portrayed. And I just kept like stumbling over my words, and I couldn't think, and I was asking terrible questions. And, I'm an editor. So at the end I was like, I think this is salvageable. And he's like, okay. And what I ended up doing is I just put it out without any edits in it. Because it just felt like this really happened to me. I was triggered by these events that reminded me of me. Anyway, the point of that is, apparently that reached people. We just we kind of just rocketed after that. And we got a lot of response to it. But what we got was letters. We got a few letters from people about how much it helped them, and to see like somebody, and just kind of vicariously feel the same thing. And then my selfish need to make something just totally like 180'd on me. And I realized, oh, wow, there's this whole other thing. And so like my goal just shifted. And ever since then, it's just been kind of like trying to help people. So we have like a Facebook group where people can come and just talk about their problems if they want to, or goof around or whatever. And it's called Pop Psych 101 Mental Health Chat, but it's like way less about our podcast than it is about just what's going on. But other than that, yeah, we just fool around every week and have fun.
That's awesome. I think we can all agree. I think we can all agree that like using the podcast as a medium, that like even if we just reach one person to at least consider and think about their mental health, it's worth it.
Yeah, totally.
Absolutely.
And using pop culture or be movies, video games, comics to show mental health as a relatable topic can really destigmatize things. I use popular culture in my own private practice almost on the daily to either get a link with a client or work on a specific diagnosis or on homework for them to work on to help them heal through some of the difficulties that they may have.
Well, I actually have a question.
I do the same thing.
Because it's all around us. It's something that we can all kind of baseline understand.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, like, all of the professionals here that use that, like, because you guys are dealing with strangers, basically, especially in the beginning. And it's like, I don't know, do you think, like, most therapists and psychologists do that because, like, it's the way in?
Not really. It depends on the therapist.
No. Yeah.
For me, I've had an interest in popular culture, mainly comics, video games, since I was a kid. And it followed me through undergrad. I did my graduate thesis on it. I got certified as a superhero therapist this year. And it's just part of my entire upbringing.
And as a quick sidebar for the character analysis we talked about, we made Dr. Goku, as a Canadian, do a character analysis on Captain Canuck.
True story.
Oh, no.
That was
It was
fun.
awesome.
How did that go? Yeah.
That was awesome.
It was good. It was surprising. And these guys are awesome. I'm telling you.
Got to do all of Alpha Flight then.
You can do Logan. You can do Wolverine.
Not good.
Yeah. The
All
second
that we
one.
haven't even touched on. We haven't
All
really
the
touched
best
any of the really
character.
big characters yet.
Yeah. Ryan, the therapist on my podcast, like he won't do Batman.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I get that. I
Doc
fucking
won't touch
hear
him.
that.
Oh shit.
He's like
Superman
it's
and Batman
done.
are the people you don't really want to touch.
That's what Doc says on our show all the time. He doesn't want to do Superman. He doesn't want to do Batman. We did Captain America, and even that was a difficult one to discuss. We only did that one because one of our top level patrons said, "Oh, I think you guys should do Captain America." It was like, well,
Yeah,
Oh,
well, we
and
did
I
Cap
have
2,
no
and Cap
allegiances.
was tough.
I mean,
I talk about Batman in every podcast.
yes, you do, Ben. Yes, you absolutely do.
I'll tell
Mostly
you one of
just to be.
Mostly
Whenever-
to troll Hannah and Brittany. But
Yeah, mostly it's just like a dick move.
I'll tell you one of our favorites we did was Squirrel Girl.
Aw.
Nice. It's a very fun character.
Hey, she was.
Yeah.
So I think we've heard a lot of personal stories so far, at least, and getting back to some of the things that were being said earlier, that I forget who it was that said it, that if we can touch one person with the podcast, it's all worth it, and to sort of piggyback on what I think it was Mike that was saying, like, it got away from us. Like it no longer became about what we wanted to talk about. And then it became, okay, how can we really help people? How can we make this bigger than ourselves? How can we make this really impact the larger community and have something positive to say? And the great thing, and I'll sort of use this to segue into the next topic I wanted to discuss, is we've started talking to writers and we started interviewing them on our show. And what I've really been fascinated with is this notion that the writers nowadays have really started to take a lot of the mental health considerations into their writing, and that they focus much more on on really humanizing these characters, because back when comic books started in like the 30s and 40s, it was tautological. Good guys were good because they were good. Bad guys were bad because they were bad. Like that was it. It was black and white. There wasn't a whole lot of gray there. And then over time, really starting with the 60s, you started to see this little bit more of humanization and characterization creep in. And nowadays, we interviewed Jeremy Whitley, and he wrote all about the Unstoppable Wasp and Nadia Van Dyne, and how in the book she goes to therapy. And that is shown. And I interviewed Robbie Thompson at New York Comic Con, and that interview will be, by the time this episode airs, it will be out. But he wrote Silk, who went to therapy. And I think one of the things that we're seeing now is this idea that depicting characters with legitimate mental health struggles is okay, and that it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to show that. And when we were talking to Jeremy, his depiction of Nadia going through a bipolar episode, she went from the manic to the depressive. The time frame was slightly compressed, but the depiction itself was incredibly realistic and did such a service to show what that is really like, and that bipolar disorder is not two-face flipping a coin, that there's actual depth to it. And so what we've seen over the years, and certainly in recent history, is a much more realistic portrayal of mental health struggles in comic books. And I think it's for the better. And I think that if someone reading these books sees the characters going through this and they're like, wow, they're a superhero and they can do all these things, and yet they're struggling, and they're going to therapy, then if I'm struggling, I can go to therapy, because if they need help, and they're like a superhero, then, sort of like it makes them more human, and it can impact people. And that's what we like to talk about on the show. And I don't know what everybody else is. I'll just sort of throw this open. Then I don't know what everybody else's experience is in your field of expertise or on your show or whatever, but what have you seen in terms of the depiction of mental health struggles throughout pop culture as it's progressed through time?
I think if I can jump in, that I think one of the most important things you just said is that those characters are going to therapy. They're not just getting better because they're dating Jennifer Lawrence or whatever. They're actually working on their stuff, and they can. It's not just going to be a magical fix. It's going to be a lot of hard work. And I think that a portrayal that's been in media is something is going to happen. A big thing is going to happen, and then you're going to be better. And that's not how it works. And I think the more that media depicts that it is a journey instead of just an event, I think that gives people hope that just because they're not better after they go to therapy 1 or 2 times or something big happens, that it's like, well, then I'm not going to be better ever.
Right, because it's not like, like bipolar disorder or like a personality disorder is going away. It's got to be managed. It's not this like 3-act thing and, woohoo and all that kind of stuff.
Right. Oh, I'm done working on my mental health.
Yeah.
Well, I know for us, I know Dr. Goku's like a broken record with it, but it's a record everyone should keep playing. But I mean, mental health, along with your physical health, of course, is a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's one thing I see a lot in my practice is some of the new clients, they want that quick fix. They say, all right, 1 or 2 sessions, because they're used to going to their medical doctor saying, all right, you have this, take this pill, you're good to go.
Yeah.
And they expect kind of the same thing within therapy and not seeing it as, okay, this is going to take 6, 12 sessions or a year or more.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, I know in the US and Canada, we kind of have different systems, but they're still rather similar in terms of insurances, in terms of mental health. To go see a mental health professional, most insurance companies pay for 3, 4, if you're lucky.
It's treated as a luxury, not a need.
Yeah, and it's something that you can do some work in 3 or 4, but you're not really going to get to the root of the issue and completely help the person manage what's going on.
Yeah, well, the one thing I've said repeatedly, and I've said to my wife, who's started going to therapy, is recovery is not linear, and I think that's another important thing that a lot of people miss. That if they're improving, quote unquote, or that they're managing it better, and then they have an off day, all of a sudden, oh well, I guess this didn't work or whatever. No, you're having a bad day. It's a setback. It's not a reset. And if you can keep that in mind, you a general that if it's possible to keep that in mind, that it's not linear, that you may take 3 steps forward and then 1 step back, and then 4 steps forwards and 3 steps back, or even 2 steps forwards and 5 steps back. But as long as you continue focusing forward, I think that's the key thing. And any pop culture depiction that shows otherwise, as you said, that all of a sudden, oh, I found the love of my life and therefore everything else goes away.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works.
Well, I know that Hannah and I actually watched Carrie last night, and there's a line in it where
the original or the remake?
The original.
The original. Where
Sue, the main non-Carrie character, like goes through this whole big trauma of, all of her class dying and stuff, spoilers. And the mom says on the phone to her friend, well, the doctor said she's so young that she won't even remember this. And she's like 18 years old.
She's a teenager.
And so like that in itself is kind of the old school mentality that like once something happens to us, like we can just get over it.
Get over it.
Or after long enough, it won't affect us anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that always bothered me about older movies that I think now a lot of movies have gotten savvy to. And I don't know also if it's because we now are in a time of like these big cinematic universes where there are movies over years and years and years where we're able to see how these characters are further affected by all the things that happened in earlier movies. But I remember like Hunger Games being one that really impressed me when I read the books and then saw the movies of, oh, this really horrible thing happened to her. And then she's continuously affected by that thing. Not this idea that's in a lot of media where once the thing that is traumatizing is past, then they're fine. They can go back to baseline like nothing happened.
Right. that series even ends kind of like that, where it's just like, and she's still affected. It's not like
Yeah, she's doing her
happy
best.
Yeah,
And PETA's still affected.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was going to talk about movies because I have to go in like 5 minutes. Well, you said you wanted me to talk about books. I'm not a reader. That's Ryan. But as far as like
books, are you talking about books? Thank God.
Audiobooks, man.
I have listened
Audiobooks are fantastic.
Yeah, but just like as far as generally like the portrayal of what I've noticed, we're on like 50 episodes now, so it's like okay, I'm really starting to get a grasp on the portrayal throughout history, and just in general, I would say my opinion is that it's hit or miss in any decade. There are some earlier stuff like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest that's like just so right on, in my opinion.
They hit the nail on the head with that one. Right.
And even to the point we talked a lot about when we did that episode, people don't like Nurse Ratched in that. She's like this like horrible villainous character throughout all of media, right? Like totally well known. When really, when you look at it from like our perspective or even a professional's perspective, you're like, she's just trying to do her job. And they portrayed her that way. And she just got a bad rap because she had to be forceful,
Well, yeah. And of course, when you take into account like the period in which it's supposed to be depicted.
Yeah. And there's a lot of sexism.
She was burnt out.
Yeah.
Exactly. I feel like for 80% of that movie, she's handling herself like a professional would. And when you watch that movie when you're younger, you identify with McMurphy and go like, oh, the system is screwing him. But then as you get older and more of a professional, you like, no, McMurphy has antisocial personality disorder and is continuously demonstrating deviant behavior.
Oh, he's the worst, entertaining, but he's the problem in that area, but just there's stuff that's so good in different decades, and then there's stuff that's just so wildly off that.
But that's the important thing that we have to look at with media and the depiction of mental health is who is the viewpoint character? Who are we supposed to be identifying with right now? Who is the one telling the story? Who is, where do all these factors come into play? How it's being framed? I mean, if we're supposed to identify with the person experiencing the mental health problems, then is it being depicted in a way that is both relatable, but, understanding and gentle, but also as harsh as it needs to be? I mean, there's a really difficult balance to walk.
I agree. And I think something that I want to touch on with mental health in media is something we touch on our show a lot because it makes all three of us bananas, is that you either see someone in therapy and then everything's okay after a few sessions, or they talk to a therapist once and like, oh, I'm okay now. And it's like, hold on, though.
Epiphany in one session.
Therapy and mental health meds aren't like taking a dose of antibiotic. You can't take a course of meds for a little while and then be healed and be better.
Or that the therapist is going to say something so mind-blowing in that session. It's going to get to like the very core of your being and like alter your whole brain chemistry.
Right.
I've had more than one person say, I thought this was going to be more like Good Will Hunting.
Gosh.
Right. Where we sit and stare at each other till we have a breakthrough moment and choke each other against a wall. But you see, the other thing is that you see so many of, this therapist is actually your hidden love interest, and they were actually the person who you were supposed to be with. And you see that trope over and over and over again, and it drives me nuts.
Oh, yeah. And that's like the most unethical. I couldn't even imagine a real life therapist. I'm sure it's happened a bunch of times, but
it's against the law.
As a malpractice, investigator, it happens a lot.
Wow.
Yeah.
You'd be shocked.
Yeah, it does happen. We talk about it. What episode? We talk it in our episode of Step Brothers. We really go to town on everything.
Yeah, we talk about it. Well, one of the things that I, like as a supervisor, I get trained to look at is the statistics of like what the ethical complaints actually come in as and what people get busted for. And, I'm sure like you as investigator, you see a different side of it than I do, but the side that I see, at least in our state the past couple of years, is that it's not as rampant as media makes it seem. It does happen, but the range of complaints is of 20, there's maybe 2 instances where that gets to complaint, and then the other 16 are complaints about people not completing CEUs, which are continuing education,
Right, yeah.
and then 2 more are
CMEs.
people who didn't pay their taxes, and they fine you for that.
Yeah, and the sad part about it is that a lot of times that these kind of things don't get caught until it's someone under investigation for healthcare fraud, which is about money.
Right.
Right.
This is a sad part of the North American healthcare culture. But yeah.
So I guess the next thing is, what is, I know we were talking and we've had a couple of personal stories so far, but what drove certainly maybe the professionals then, speaking as a non-professional, what drove you to come into this field, or why is it that you wanted to, enter and into helping others? Was there something that happened in your past? What's your origin story? I'll put it in comic book terms. Let's start with Anna, because I know Anna has to go soon, so I want to get her out before she pops out. We already lost Mike.
Fast. I guess my origin story is that I have a lot of trauma in my past. My father actually has antisocial personality disorder. And so growing up with him, there was a lot of abuse, especially emotional abuse. And so I have grown up struggling with depression and anxiety. I've got a touch of OCD. There's a lot. So I know what it's like to be in the client's position. And so I just kind of, as I got older, this solidified in my mind, like I want to help people who are going through this kind of stuff. I think that's really common in therapy and being a professional. A lot of the people I met in schooling had the same kind of stuff where like if not they themselves experience this kind of stuff, then they know someone really close to them who does. So it does help to have that kind of inside perspective. If we're going to talk about media, then I know how important media is in just kind of opening up that it is okay to struggle with this stuff. I don't know if you guys are aware of the book Speak by Laurie Halse Anderson, but I read that when I was really young. I want to say like 13 or 12. And it depicts someone who goes through, she's raped, and she goes through kind of the trauma of dealing with it and being really quiet about it and kind of getting to this place where she can get help for it. And I've never gone through that myself, but I related to her in how she was handling her trauma and just being able to read. And she was, like I said, she was the viewpoint character. So just being able to read something from someone who was going through the same emotions I was going through was really powerful. And I think that if we're talking about the depiction of mental health in media, that is something we need to think about, is how the people that are going through the same things are reading these and seeing these films and playing these games and saying, oh my gosh, it's okay to experience the things I'm experiencing. Like you said, like, oh my gosh, they're a superhero, they can deal with that. They're a superhero, they're going through that. It's important for us to see that it's just a thing that we experience as humans.
Yeah, it's a thing that happens to us. It's not a defining attribute of who we are.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just a thing, and things happen.
Very well said. Very, very well stated. I do think it's important that there are those sort of positive depictions of people with various disorders and issues in media, because we as a species like to look for ourselves, and we are looking for someone to relate to in media. And so if we can find ourselves in that and we say, okay, well, if they're going through it, then I can do that. But do it in a positive way. And
Yeah.
I think
And I
that's
think one
helpful.
important thing that's happening in media, and Ben, you kind of touched on this when you talked about The Last Jedi, is I think people were caught off guard by how Luke was being portrayed as someone who's gone through a lot and is dealing with that trauma. It's because the movie didn't say, like, look at this person who's dealing with trauma. It's not a movie about trauma, but there is a character who is explicitly experiencing it. It just isn't stated. And I think if a movie or a piece of media isn't explicitly stated as, oh, a book about mental health and mental illness, then it kind of gets shoved under the rug a little bit.
Or completely misinterpreted or eviscerated, even in the case of Last Jedi, by many fans. Like, if you look at how Joker was depicted, like, it's very clearly depicted that this is going to be a mental health movie to take on Joker. And Last Jedi was, you're right, not even remotely. It's like, it's Star Wars, it's awesome, and go and enjoy Star Wars. I'm like, this is very different movie. This is a very different movie.
They ruined my Luke. You know, those people.
Mm-hmm.
The butthurt fanboys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll jump in really quick. This is Hannah from Popcorn Psychology. I started seeing a therapist when I was 25, and my first therapist told me that maybe I should think about becoming a therapist. And I was like, what? I don't think so. I have way too many problems. So I struggle with depression, anxiety, and past trauma. And it was one of those experiences where once I got to grad school and I was sitting in my first marriage and family therapy class, it really felt like that was where I was supposed to be. And since then, I've been able to complete everything. But really, I think being on the other side, having been a client, I think sometimes really is helpful when it comes to having a good idea of what it could be like for a client coming in. Like, at the end of all my intake sessions, I pretty much say, thank you so much for coming in. I know it's really hard to tell somebody all of your stuff, and I really appreciate that you're able to be as open as you were, just because I think it's something that it could be really stressful. So, and I think, what I really like about doing our podcast is that we really get a chance to kind of lay it out for everybody and to kind of point out, like, no, this is not how things work. This is not what this would actually be like. And I think the other thing that I think is a little bit different about ours is that we have 3 different mental health professionals. So I think it's also really helpful to show people that all 3 of us look at things in a different way, which I think, again, talks to how important it is to have a really good fit for your therapist. I think that's something else that people don't realize, that it's so hard to make that phone call and make that first appointment. And then you go and you're kind of like, I don't know if I really like them, but then feel either A, like then I'm not going to go anymore because I don't like them, or B, that they can't do anything about it.
Right.
One size fits all.
Exactly.
And in speaking, like, professionally for what I do for a living, like, all these people are licensed. It's definitely here in the United States. Like, you, depending on what state or territory you live in, you can research all of these people online. The federal, state, and municipal governments are mandated by law to produce data pertaining to, the professionals past, like where they graduated from their independent schools, what kind of certifications they have, if they are someone who can prescribe medication. By law they have to list, like, what kind of stuff they're billing to Medicare and Medicaid. So you can do your research and you can kind of pick up on red flags if you think someone might not be a good fit. So I highly suggest anyone to do their research before picking a provider.
Yeah, and I also, like, if I've had several people who have found me on, like, Psychology Today, which is one of the places that people find us, and they'll send me an email and say, hey, can I just talk to you? And I'm like, absolutely. Like, I will absolutely talk to you and answer questions, just so that, like, for, not for like an hour, but like, so to give you a sense of what I'm like. Yes, it says it on my profile, but sometimes we just have to Exactly. Like, does it feel like you understand what I'm going through? Not necessarily, instead of having to wait until that first appointment and try to and try to wait for that. And so, in my anxiety has actually been something that I have to deal with when we record. Like, I have a whole setup. I'm currently holding on to like a crystal and a rock. It's like a very, I have a whole thing I have to do. And actually, if you listen to our episodes, I don't really talk that much in like the first like 5 or 6 episodes, because I'm so anxious and so worried about voicing my opinion and people thinking that I don't know what I'm talking about. And so, I mean, even that, you know, can sometimes come up. And so I think it's also part of why I like doing this so much, because it's also actually helped me feel more, I don't know, feel better about that. I know what I'm doing.
Syndrome.
Exactly.
And
Amen.
Those
have to go, guys. Bye.
Bye, Anna.
But
Anna.
those
Thank you
Thanks
so
for
much.
joining us.
Thanks for joining us.
those personal rituals are so important. Like I myself, thankfully we record late at night, but I tend to have an adult beverage just because I have a horrible, debilitating speech impediment. Which doing the podcast, and I kind of host it on behalf of our co-hosts, it's kind of helped me in my comfort level, so my stammers and my stutters don't come out. So it's one of those things that has helped improve my physical health as well.
Go so far. I don't take the opportunity to tell my story very often, so I'll give you guys kind of a rundown. So in my family, there's a long history of depression and also substance abuse. There's several people in my family that have died from alcoholism, and it's a returning struggle. It's actually why I generally don't work with substance abuse, because I have to draw a boundary for myself there. But as far as myself, I've dealt with depression and ADHD throughout my life. If you've listened to my podcast, you probably heard my inattentiveness happen at times where I get distracted by things. But I also, at one point, due to that unique combination, was misdiagnosed with bipolar for a long time and took medication for that ended up poisoning my kidneys. And that has created a sense of anxiety in me that I have to deal with at times about like just existential, like how's this going to impact my life and how long my lifespan, and try not to be angry and bitter about that happening, but also being able to come up to a point where I can understand the medical side of things that clients go through and the consequences of actually giving someone medication and how to kind of work with them to evaluate the benefits versus the cost, because I still do have to take medicine to manage the depression and anxiety, but I'm super weary of it because of what taking medication for years that I did not need due to a misdiagnosis. So it's helped me a lot to identify with that. I also am a cancer survivor. I got diagnosed with testicular cancer in 2016. Fortunately, I didn't have to go through chemo and all of that, but I did have to go through the process of realizing that my body might be trying to kill me and it might impact my ability to have children. And had to deal with that. And I've also had, while in grad school, dealt with a depressive episode that derailed me for a year of school, and have now gone through a point where people like, while in school were saying like, oh, I don't know, like, do you think you can make it through this program? And I said, yes, I don't quit. And now I've accelerated myself to where I've been one of the youngest managers promoted at my various jobs, and have been a clinical director for a while because of the perspective and determination I've been able to have, and have been able to use my resources to go to therapy and to take medications and have supports throughout my life that have helped me to find a perspective and skills needed to succeed despite having diagnosis and history of family mental illness.
I mean, I can jump in now. This is Brittany from Popcorn Psych. That was Ben, because he didn't say his name.
I do that. See, the intentiveness.
I don't have like an awareness of why I wanted to be a therapist. It's just something I kind of wanted to do for as long as I can remember. But there was no big like where I saw a therapist as a kid, or I knew anyone who saw therapy. I don't know if like I saw something on Sally Jesse Raphael when I was little and it like brought something into my brain about psychology. So I remember even like when you're like in elementary school and they make you like write down what you want to be when you grow up, I'd always put like a psychologist, but I have no cognizant idea where that came from, but it stuck with me obviously all the way till now. Because I didn't even start going to therapy myself for like anxiety and some like depressive symptoms until I was in my 30s, but I've been doing that now for 2 years and it's been one of the best things I've ever done. So I don't have a super weighty origin story going into psychology, other than it just was something that very much interested me and something I've always been, I don't know, it's so dorky to say like I felt a calling towards it because that's so dorky.
It's not
But
dorky at all.
I think it does feel like something I was always supposed to do and something I always thought about doing. Like I had Barbies that did like group therapy and I don't even know where I saw that. I have no idea where. That's what I say. It must have been a talk show or something, or like maybe it was on Days of Our Lives. I don't
Probably.
know. But that's kind of the long and the short of my backstory.
Guardians, guys?
Well, I guess I can jump in. I haven't told my story too much, but when I was a kid, me and my family were involved in a rather big car accident that led me to suffer from trauma, anxiety, and go see a child psychologist when I was a kid. That really helped me. And growing up, I had some issues with anxiety, depression, where pop culture, mainly some of those Saturday morning TV shows, so the Batman the Animated Series, Ghostbusters, Ninja Turtles really helped me through it. And I had some difficulties through undergrad and grad school with depressive episodes that I've been in and out of therapy for the better part of my life. That has greatly helped me be where I am now.
Wow. So, Joe, you got anything you want to? I think you're the last one.
Am I really? No. No, yeah. I mean, my history is, it's not very grand or anything. I suffered from anxiety in an extreme way. I was actually medicated for several years for it and would go through panic attacks. And I've always been a very outgoing person. I always try my best to help others and this and that, but I just couldn't help myself. And then I started communicating more with people about, in my network to, take better care of myself. And that's when I reached out to my doctor and everything. And eventually I was able to work myself into a self-care plan, and then actually got off the anxiety medicine and have just been kind of dedicating my free time to educating myself as much as I can, where, with having a family and a day job and doing all the things that we all do and love to do, but educating myself more with mental health. And the more I learn, I figure I could pay forward to helping others. So I might not be a doctor, but I do my very best to get as many certifications and trainings and network with for great resources and do my best. Right now I'm currently about 60 hours in on a 200-hour volunteering with a crisis text line as one of their crisis counselors. So several times a week I'm on that platform assisting people going through immediate crisis. And that's where I am right now. That's my story. And I'm just an average Joe. Don't be fooled by my name. It is real. Like, I am an average Joe.
Joe, you're going through training to be a crisis counselor. Trust me, there's nothing average about that. That is incredibly honorable and one of the most commendable things that you can do, because you are, literally putting yourself on the front lines there in dealing with folks that are in crisis. And I have a friend who does a crisis hotline for sex abuse and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. And the stuff that she has to hear, and she is herself a recovering, someone who's gone through a great amount of trauma in her past. And folks like that, and I tip my hat to Doc, who's not here. I tell him all the time, and to all of you, both the professionals and the non-professionals, just everybody who does this, it's yeoman's work. My origin story, so to speak, I've posted about it on the site, and I've spoken about it. I was suicidally depressed in high school, and I I did have a epiphany of sorts. I know we just spent like a whole hour talking about how you don't have this one event and clarifies everything for you. And it didn't clarify everything, but it did give me a sorely needed perspective. Long story short, that there was a kid in this. I was a junior, he was a senior, and he died in a car accident. And over the weekend, and we had come into school the next day, or I guess that Monday, and my religion teacher was talking to us, because I went to a Catholic high school, about the incident and how we were all coping with it. And he said, well, Tony's not going to get to graduate, and Tony's not going to get to do this, and Tony's not going to get to do all those things. And in high school, everybody knew me as Tony. And it occurred to me, like, had I killed myself, had I committed suicide, he would be talking about me. And just sort of from my perspective, that's how I heard it, and that's how it impacted me. And I was I look back on it now, and the fact that I didn't just flee the room sobbing hysterically, or I didn't just have an immediate breakdown in the classroom. I don't know how that didn't happen, but from then on, like I think about him from time to time, and I think about the impact that sadly that his death has had on my life. And so always trying to do everything I can to help others, and to live a life that is worth celebrating, and paying it forward as much as possible. And so in whatever small way that I can do that, and this is like 20 years on now, 21 years basically, that it's been since that incident, that I think back on that, and the trajectory that my life has taken since then has been vastly different. And I know the signs now. And to some of the other points is I am currently researching therapists, because I do want to talk to somebody, because I've spoken about depression as my recurring villain. To put it in the comic book terms that a lot of folks can understand, is, depression is my recurring villain that he's never gone away. He'll be locked up in Arkham Asylum or what have you for a while, and I can manage it. But then eventually he breaks out and he wreaks havoc on my life. And it's not always easy to do that. And as a father now, I have a 6-month-old at home. My sister always says that having a child makes you deal with your stuff, makes you face your baggage more than anything. And I know we've got some parents in this chat, and I'm sure you understand that all of a sudden you realize you think you have everything figured out, until you realize that you have to model for someone else. You have to model your life for someone else, and you go, oh, I don't want them to be. Oh God, I have all these things that I haven't grappled with, or I haven't chosen to face, but now I don't want my child to end up like that. So now I have to figure it out so that they don't have to go through the same stuff that I went through. So that's sort of my origin story, as it were.
To piggyback on what you said there, Anthony, it's one thing with mental health professionals. I always say to a lot of clients is sometimes do as I say, not necessarily as I do. Because sometimes we aren't the best models for proper mental health. I try to be as much as I can, but sometimes it's not that's the way kind of life revolves around.
No, and I understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. So knowing that we are not infallible, we are human, and we're going to have off days, and it happens. And it's something. Oh, go ahead, son.
I was just gonna say, to piggy on your piggy. What like the moment you, like as a father, I have a 9 and a 6-year-old. Like once you accept that you have to manage that unwanted companion, that is your mental health. Once you kind of accept that, you can kind of get on an even keeled plane in order to navigate parenthood, in my experience, at least.
In ACT therapy, one example they give is the therapist and the client are both climbing a mountain. The difference is the therapist is on a different mountain than the client, and they may be a little higher up, so they can see a different path for the other person. But that therapist is still climbing their own mountain.
I really like that analogy. And I certainly, acknowledge, and Doc would certainly agree with me, that just because you're a mental health professional doesn't mean that you are free of any, anything that you're a PhD or you're an MD or, you're a psychiatrist, psychologist, what have you. You've got it all figured out. Like, I know that's not the case. And Doc will certainly tell you he is far from an infallible human being. And he's been my best friend for over 20 years. And if anybody knows he's not infallible, believe me, it's me. But, I know that. And I think that that's an important thing that it's all about destigmatizing and breaking that down and understanding that therapists are people too. And therapists have to talk to somebody. I'm sure that the professionals in this room or in this chat, many of you probably talk to coworkers or you have your own therapist. I mean, and is that a correct statement, I guess?
Yep. It's certainly not uncommon for us to do that. Like I first had a therapist when I was 13, and I've gone back off and on as needed, but it's definitely common for us to either seek supervision to work through like professional side of things and the difficulties we may get from clients, or to seek professional counseling from another therapist on our own for our own issues. And it's important to be able to find the balance for that, because some issues are professional and others are personal, and you have to be able to figure out who's the right person to talk to for each of those different circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, I won't ever be a therapist who doesn't have a therapist. I always have to have one, just for myself. I think it's the way that I am, and trying to be really aware, and just having somebody I can talk to about professional, just like you said, Ben, professional and personal things, and how sometimes, again, having somebody come in who, like, I want to help because I wanted to be able to help my sister or something like that, and being able to go to a professional that I already have a relationship with and say, man, I'm really struggling with like trying to have my own boundaries around what I should be doing as a professional and what I want to do personally, because I want to try to solve this feeling that I have that I've carried for such a long time. So I've been in therapy for about 10 years now and have an established therapist here in Chicago that I will probably see forever for that reason.
All right. I guess, I know we talked about the depiction, and sort of planning this, we talked about the depictions of mental health. We wanted to touch on some personal stories, and I think we've done an excellent job of that. Is there anything else, I think, for our listeners? We've sort of been navel gazing a little bit. Not that there's anything necessarily wrong with that, but for our listeners, I guess what's something that you all want to reach, since we are obviously all reaching people that may not necessarily be listening to our show specifically, but maybe somebody who hasn't heard Capes on the Couch, but you're a fan of Popcorn Psychology, or Pop Psych 101, and you're being introduced to Guardians listeners, etc. What do you want to say to the listeners, both as maybe a professional or the non-professionals in the room, that hasn't been said already?
I would say that if you're struggling with your mental health and how to orient it, and talk to someone, almost anyone, even if you don't want to talk to someone, find a stranger. If you don't want to talk on the phone or in person, text 741-741, the crisis text line. Just start conversing and make that leap forward if you want to address your mental health.
Know that it's okay to not be okay. It's something that I say almost every day.
And I would say, because we kind of what Anna was saying earlier, a lot of the movies we talk about on Popcorn Psychology aren't quote unquote mental health movies. Like, we purposely pick movies that are more like blockbuster mainstream movies that maybe no one would ever think of in terms of mental health, to kind of convey the message that mental health is everywhere, even when you're not looking. And so to help, like I said, anyone who's listening, that it's not as isolating as you think, and it's not as weird as you think. Like, mental health isn't everywhere, and it's in all things. And as long as we start really seeing it, then it's less of, oh, that person down the street who goes to a therapist, or that one cousin who goes to a therapist. Like, mental health is everywhere.
Yeah, one of the things we always like to say is, I don't know if you guys saw, I jumped back on.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Is mental health is health. There's Ryan always likes to say, like, he wants it to get to a point where it's like, okay, the same thing as I have a broken ankle or some sort of ailment, like it's treated the same way. It's so common to have issues with your mental health. I mean, it's super hard being a human, being like conscious, like not to get too like philosophical, but just being so aware as we are, it's just tough. So it's really common to have problems with your mental health. But mental health is even just being healthy. You know, it's something to take care of. So yeah.
I'll piggyback here too. It's that I think the thing that I want to communicate most is that, like everyone's saying, is don't suffer in silence. If something is going on, there are people out there who can help. And it's, you know, if it's too hard to talk to people that you know, or to feel like you're vulnerable, or to reveal anything, it's okay to take your time and research therapists. There's lots of us out there. There's lots of different perspectives. There's lots of modalities. There's lots of ways that people can help you and can be there for you so that you don't have to be alone. It's not weakness, it's strength. To seek help is not weakness at all, and it doesn't mean that something is permanently wrong with you or that something is broken inside of you. It might mean that you need some support getting through something. It may mean you have something that's going to be something that needs to be worked on and managed forever. It may mean that, but what is better is, or better to do, is to be managing it as opposed to pretending it's not there. Because if you pretend it's not there, the things that are going wrong will keep going on, whether you acknowledge them or not. And to have the opportunity to do things a little bit better and to have someone guide you through that and help you through that can really make a big difference in your life.
Another thing is, like, specifically because we all do a lot of pop culture stuff, and we focus on accuracy, like I said before, but because it's so prevalent, we hear mental health a lot more these days, mental health awareness. But if you see like a specific portrayal, like I always tell people I know now to just be a little skeptical of a like fantastical portrayal of mental health. Like dissociative identity disorder, it's always like this awesome plot thing for movies and stuff. But like, if you see mental health and it's like so super scary, like it might not be exactly the way the movie's showing you. So if you're questioning it, like, just look it up on Google and see if it's even similar at all.
The one thing I'll jump in here and say is I saw something recently on Facebook that I had to laugh, and we're talking about the destigmatization, is it said like boomers like whispering, oh, that I think our neighbor, she went to ... therapy.
Yeah.
And then millennials, in all caps, OMG, y'all, guess what my therapist just told me? Like, and I had to laugh because I think it's so true, though, that there is this discussion that, at least, as a millennial, an elder millennial, as Eliza Schlesinger would say, but I still technically am a millennial, 82, damn it. That,
Same.
Same. That there is this.
I'm so glad you admit that.
That there is this much more openness about it, and I think generationally that the millennial generation and Gen Z, or whatever the kids are calling themselves these days, that they are not going to have those same hangups about stuff. And then maybe, just maybe, by the time my son has children, should I be blessed to see that day, that I'm not going to go so far as to say that it'll be fine and there will be no problems, but I think it's going to be a lot less stigmatized. And I'm hoping that this trend continues, that it won't be spoken about in hushed tones, or that, you know, oh, they're talking to someone, you know, those waspy, you know, type folks that are, you know, always interested in other people's business. Like, yeah, they're getting help. What are you doing about it? You know, they're getting help. You're judging them. Who's the dick here? So I think that our generation is a lot more open and freeing about that. And I hope that it continues. Again, not that it's without problems, but that we are moving towards that state that hopefully, you know, one day we will see that it is, you know, oh, I had to go to the therapist is as common as, oh, you know, I had a sniffle, so I went to the doctor to go see it.
And ideally it'll be integrated more into everything, like school, and your overall, like getting a wellness check will also include psychology. Like that's my hope, is that it just becomes just way more integrated into everything, and less of a very specific odd thing you do that you have to make the very pointed choice to do.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in real fast that I'm in New Jersey. One of my state legislators, who I've actually known for a long time, is a good friend of mine. He said he introduced a bill to allow students in, I think it's maybe just high school, or maybe high school and grammar school, to take mental health days. Like, it's going to be actually allotted, that in addition to your sick days, that you get mental health days. And I think he allotted 3 or 4. Obviously, you know, you can't take every day as a mental health day, but it's something, you know, that it is, Absolutely. That is an acknowledgement that there is something that needs to be done about it. And we have to give these kids the ability to say, you know what, I'm burnt out. I just need a day where just whatever, and no questions, no judgment, just take the day. I'm 37. I take mental health days from work. So you do need them, and it does happen.
It does happen. It happens for all of us. And I think one of the things I wanted to comment on, since we're here in Chicago, is that our teachers union is currently striking right now. And one of the things that they're putting on the table, they've been offered like a 16% raise, and they're even refusing that, because one of the things that they're saying is, we need nurses, we need social workers, and counselors and librarians in our schools, because the schools are often splitting mental health staff between schools, and that's outrageous when you have as many kids in the school. And I'm really happy to see that and fully support them.
No, and that's the most important, like, so important. When you're young.
That's the onset of so many things, particularly in high school.
Yeah.
But I think also it's just the messaging of, are we prioritizing mental health at that age? Like, if it's not even in your school, then you're already starting the messaging of mental health is not important.
Absolutely.
Or it's not something we prioritize.
We don't talk about that here. Yeah, we don't talk about that here. This isn't where you come to talk about that. Uh-oh.
It should be a class, you know what I mean?
I think I literally just
posted.
Sorry,
all my headphones just died.
Just posted on Twitter a couple days ago how some legislator somewhere said some shit about how they need to worry about fucking peer. Oh, I forgot.
We're swearing.
I'm sorry. My brain totally went out the window. I'm sorry. I did make it this far. Anyway, it was about, they were talking about peer pressure. And I went on and said, no, you know what? Peer pressure has been a thing forever. I'm not so much worried about that. You know what I think would be really helpful? Let's teach kids what mental health symptoms look like, and maybe what it might feel like for them, and the difference that would make. And especially when we think about the onset of some mental health symptoms and illnesses come between the ages of 17 and 24. The amount of people that I have in my office who have no idea that is the time when things may shift, and why college might be so hard blows my mind. Even giving some general information would be so much more important than worrying about peer pressure, which will always be a thing.
I couldn't even imagine, like when my stuff started, it was like around 19, and I started with like some of the more manic symptoms. I also started having like really bad panic attacks. Like I went to the hospital all the time.
Yeah.
If I had just had any information back then about the fact that the panic attack is, it sucks, it's scary, but like, it's like, it wasn't going to kill me. Like, I could have saved a lot of money. I could have probably been a lot more comfortable just I probably would have got over like that phase, all the panic attacks quicker. Like I had no information back then.
Yeah, and I think that is what continues to be heartbreaking, that not only are they not teaching sexual health at all, which is bananas, we're also not talking about mental health at all. And there're just so many things that would shift, and so much, and I think it would impact stigma. Absolutely. I think it might even be one of the things that would completely wipe it off, because then it would be completely normal to learn about mental health in school, kind of what you said, Ben. Like, if we make it a part of everyday life, like it should be, because it is already freaking happening, then it would, I don't think stigma would be a thing anymore.
Not to get out on a soapbox too much, but one of the things I feel plays a big part into that is how spread thin mental health professionals are.
Absolutely.
In terms of there's not enough to go around, and the ones that are practicing are just overloaded in terms of how many clients and the workload that they do have, that they don't have enough time to do a lot of that education or able to spread the message about mental health and symptoms and what's going on.
I will
Doc would agree with you, but he's not here because he got stuck at work because he's been short-staffed. So,
right.
To case in point.
Exactly.
Right.
Case in point.
And I want to piggyback here on that, is that I was a supervisor. I mean, I still am, but I was a supervisor in a community mental health agency where Brittany and Hannah and I all worked, and we worked with the most chronic population. We worked with people who were hospitalized, and our goal was specifically to intercept people who are in the hospital and work with them on getting the resources to decrease hospitalizations, which, benefits the insurance companies, which manage Medicaid now, which I have issues with, but that's for later topic. But it helps manage that, but it also helps decrease the crisis moments of going to the hospital, because every time you go to the hospital is a traumatic moment. It's not something that's fun. It's not something that feels good. And it is like a loss of freedom moment. And something that we would see, especially as supervisors, is that the number of people that we had to assign to one clinician was outrageous. It was just outrageous. For this high population, we'd have like 100 people to a clinician, and the amount of paperwork and regulations that kept coming. Like when the job started, the program lasted 4 years. When the job started, it was a breath of fresh air because we were able to have some freedom, and the amount of documentation we did was sensible to what we were doing. And as time went on, it got so absurdly ridiculous that staff were burning out. Yeah. They couldn't handle the workload and do the interventions that the people needed. So it became a constant struggle of, do people have time to do the work that they need to do in order to make the interventions that they need to do, and also complete the paperwork that the regulators are demanding be done?
As someone who's been hospitalized, inpatient twice for suicidal stuff, and intensive outpatient for a while too, is when you get there, you're already really lonely. They take your shoelaces, and it's getting better, but like where I wasn't very comfortable. And then the people are so overworked that you're there for however many days, and you could fit all the meetings you have with people inside of like 2 hours, and you're there until they let you leave. So what ends up happening, you're not working on, there's just not a lot happening. So you end up, for me, like I ended up doing a lot of exaggerating about how much better I felt so I could get out.
Yeah. I worked in a different field because I work in private practice, but it's kind of the similar type of thing. I had to reduce my caseload just because it was so much, and it just creeps up so fast. Right now I'm close to 100 clients, and I want to be around 80 just because I have insurance companies and regulations in terms of paperwork and things to write for either insurances, lawyers, a variety of things that I just do not have the time to do. And I know that that's the entirety of every professional in my city, in terms of there are none in terms of free spots because we're so overbooked.
Yep. It happens to all of us. It all reaches a point where I would have 4 more appointment slots or so in a day available if I didn't have to do as much paperwork as I have to do.
I mean, like everything, there's a lot of different parts to this that need to be shifted and changed, but I'm glad that at least we're here and we're able to make a change and reach people that aren't coming specifically to see us. And I think the idea that helping one person, we've talked to a couple different people, or I think I was interviewed by somebody for a paper not that long ago, and they asked, what was your goal? Like, what is your goal for having your podcast? I was like, my goal is to help one person feel like they are heard or understood, or help them understand that they can get help if they have the resources. Like, and that's already happened. So we've kind of already met our goal. And so just continuing this and being able to, do something like this where we can all talk about it together and kind of show people, look, there's all different parts to this, but we're all here to help. And we know that the resources aren't where they need to be. And hopefully by doing something like this and reaching out to different kinds of professionals, that we can find a way to make a shift in policy to make these things easier.
Your mouth to God's ears.
Hannah, did I see you kind of like squirm when they were talking about millennials in 82?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm 83 and I feel like I'm in the same boat as you. So I wanted to give a quick thing. I read an article. This is like 2 days ago. Some study or something came out, and some professional somewhere is now naming like between 77 and 83 is no longer a millennial. We are now called Zennials because we're exactly like a Gen X mixed with millennials.
That makes me feel much better. Much better.
Got a subcategory.
I think it goes to 85 or 87.
Oh, does it? Okay.
The people who grew up with, the computer age and tapes and know what floppy disks are.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And VHS.
But then also like ushered in social media and stuff. Yeah.
Right, had AOL and went through the evolution from AOL to Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
You're still a millennial.
I didn't have an AOL, Ben, so shut up.
I did have AOL.
Totally.
I did have AOL. I had, what did I have? I had Juno before AOL.
Oh,
yeah.
I remember that one.
Did you post that to your GeoCities page though?
Oh my God.
No, I did have a GeoCities page, but I was on AOL by that point.
I had a Zanga.
I had a Zanga. Oh, I've never met anybody else that had a Zanga.
I don't even know what that is.
Oh my God. I hope nobody younger is listening right now.
And it was Zanga with an X because it was cool.
Yep.
I played Doom on floppy disks.
Oh my God.
Same.
Oh,
I played Wolfenstein on floppy disks.
Oh,
yes, sir. Me too.
Game. Wolfenstein
Love
3D.
Wolfenstein.
Amazing.
All right. I think we've, I think we broke away from the topic a bit. Let's, I guess, I don't know what else to add. I mean, we've been going now for an hour 40. I don't know if any of our listeners are going to hold on for this long by the time the episode comes out. So do we just want to, wrap things up and I guess tell everybody where they can find you all on the internet and social media and all that? So I guess I'll get started. You can find us at capesonthecouch.live. We have Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Capes on the Couch. We have a Patreon page that you can go to, patreon.com/capesonthecouch. We have a TeePublic page where you can go and buy cool swag with our logo on it. And you can find me personally at Anthony Sitko on Instagram and Twitter. The views expressed on my personal page do not necessarily reflect those of Capes on the Couch. I feel I'm a little more free with my thoughts because I don't have to be on brand, so to speak. Who wants to jump in next?
We can go. So we are Popcorn Psychology. You can find us at popcorn_psych on Twitter, at Popcorn Psychology on Facebook, and we're also on Instagram. I'll let Brittany tell you what that is, though.
It's Popcorn Psychology, Ben.
There we go. I do not use the Instagram. I'm a grandpa in that respect.
I don't know.
But,
Instagram is...
Yeah, so you can find us in all of those places, and anywhere you find podcasts, we are available as Popcorn Psychology, and we look for popcornpsychology at Gmail if you want to send us a private message or and Patreon. We also have a Patreon now. patreon.com/popcorn psychology. If you want to check out a place to get some cool swag and interact with us, we're very responsive on any of those outlets. So please reach out to us if you want to talk to us more.
And for Guardians MH, you can find all of our resources and all the ways to get in touch with us just at guardiansmh.org. Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, all the social media places just at guardiansmh. If you want to get involved, let us know. We also have a Patreon, which is linked onto our website as well. Me personally, you can find me most actively on Twitter and Twitch just at Sentinel Dad, extra D on the end.
Notice how we all got quiet because we were allowing Alex to do the close for us because he does it every time. We'll mess it up.
It's true. That's why I don't go on vacation that much.
For me, again, at Guardians MH, but me personally, you can find me pretty much everywhere online at SSJ5Goku28.
There you go.
Oh, I guess poppsych101.com if you want to find us. You can go there, and then all of the social medias are at poppsych101. And then, we're on all the platforms. You can listen to us everywhere. I don't think there's one we're not on.
In
places.
And I know Anna with Freudian Sips had to leave early, but you can catch Freudian Sips just at Freudian Sips Pod on Twitter, and also FreudianSipsPod.com for their podcast.
Yeah, I literally just brought up their page just to give them a plug because I didn't want Anna to feel left out. Yeah, exactly. Same. Yeah. I brought it up.
Yeah, I can't plug my personal page because I'm a Making a Murderer fanatic, and I would just annoy people. So.
There's a podcast I follow. I don't remember which one, but in addition to their main account, or I guess the creator is a big fan of Big Brother. And so like every time there's an episode, everything is spammed with hashtag BB21, so much so that on TweetDeck I had to mute it because I just have to mute anything with that hashtag. I just have to leave because you're spamming my feed. I'm trying to talk to people and all I'm getting is stuff about people living in a house that I don't care about. So I guess that's going to wrap it up then. So thank you all to everyone for joining this and for answering my call to arms, so to speak. It has been an honor and a privilege to share the same space and to play in the same sandbox with all of you. And I hope that we can all do this again. And, maybe this can lead to smaller groups. Now the Avengers have formed, and we've had the thing. Now maybe certain Avengers can pop up in other Avengers movies. So
some crossovers.
Oh God,
it's already happened in a couple of these.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, I know. Popcorn Psych and us have shared the stage together.
Oh my gosh,
I went on with Guardians once too. So
yeah.
And I know Doc has been meaning to reach out to you, Dr. Goku. I know I keep telling him, but and that'll be just him, so that the two of you can talk all, real therapy type stuff. You don't have to worry about me.
We can nerd out.
Yeah, exactly. You can nerd out and you don't have to worry about me going there. Well, I don't know what these things are. I feel like such an idiot whenever Doc goes off on his stuff because I'm not the professional.
I'm totally going to make a graphic Mental Health Avengers of all of us.
Oh,
Yay.
Oh, sweet. I think that. Well, then
Awesome.
You need to get that done before this episode drops, so that we can put it as the art for the page.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
Anthony has the Cap tattoo, so he might get dibs on Cap.
Yes. If we're all Avengers, can I be Captain America? Moon Knight. Or Moon Knight. I'm okay with that.
All my tattoos are DC Comics.
Everyone.
I feel so alone.
Put in the tweet after this who you like, and I'll figure something out.
Awesome. That's fantastic. So again, thank you guys so much for doing this, and we will have to do this again at some point.
Yeah, thank you so much,
Awesome.
Anthony.
Thanks for the invite.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.
Yeah.